Good morning, everybody. First, before we start, gotta toss this up. All right. Give me 1 second. All right. So, as always, one of the first things we gotta look at is the news, right? So we got CPI. Then we have no news on Monday and Tuesday, as well as Sunday. We don't really have much. So, obviously we don't trade on Sundays, but we do trade sometimes on Mondays and definitely on Tuesdays. This week, because CPI's ahead of us, we may not get much. 1 second. But yeah, so Monday we're probably not going to see much take place. Tuesday, maybe decent. We'll definitely see some fireworks on Wednesday because of the FOMC related event, and then we also have, obviously, like I mentioned, CPI, which will definitely have some fireworks. So just some things to keep in mind going into this week. Let me pull up. We're going to talk about seasonality today, as always. The process, hopefully those of you that do join these live calls on a weekly basis, hopefully you're starting to get a feel for the process and, kind of like how everything works, how consistent things are. Last week we assumed that price would drop. If it was going to rally at some point, it would likely drop first. And obviously price has done that. And then we kind of saw price run up from the weekly fair value gap that was pointed out literally last week. Because obviously price took out buy side, created a fractal high, then ended up dropping down. And if we look at the weekly chart, for all three of the indices, price basically dug down into their fair value gap, an order block, and they all pretty much had a very similar reaction, which was them just pushing higher. So yeah, we'll get into a lot of different things this morning. So hopefully you guys can follow along. If you guys ever have any questions along the way, obviously let me know, and we will try to answer your questions as best as I possibly can, because it's very, very important Sundays when it comes to preparation. So yeah, with that being the case, we already talked about the news, so let's talk about the bonds now. All right, so remember, the bonds dictate generally where the currencies opposed to the DXY are going to go, and they also dictate where the indices generally want to go as well. Okay, so with that being the case, So yeah, with that being the case, we could see how price for all three of these interest rate markets here, prices pretty much came off the high, right? While it did that, you can see that there was an impact that took place in the indices, right? So they came off their high as well, in conjunction with what the bonds did, okay? But then obviously things went down, hit the weekly fair value gap like I mentioned, and then started to rally. You can also argue that the S&T at these highs here played a pretty strong role. We also have S&T, I believe, here as well, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so if we look at this high, I guess there wasn't really much of an S&T there. There was an S&T here at these lows though, right? So inside that weekly fair value gap, you could see how price hit the lows, hit the weekly fair value gap, and then rallied off the lows. All right, so we could see the response from that. So like I mentioned yesterday to my private community, we have an order block here, order block here, order block here, SMT at the lows, prices rallied up as a result, right? If the price does want to open, drop down into this order block, and then try to rally up, the first targets are obviously going to be the previous high here, right? Because each of the candles, each of these highs and lows play a significant role because they're previous day's highs and lows. So price is going to want to maybe get up to this high, maybe get up to the fair value gap up here some more. It's going to have to take out previous day's highs, previous week high. This is also a previous week high as well. You can see the gray area. The highlights Sundays. So this was last Sunday. This was the Sunday before last week, right? So this is the previous 2 weeks high, previous week that we just recently passed high here. We got the previous week's low. You can see how last week, the previous week's low got taken out as well here, right? Which is also again in conjunction with that weekly fair value gap, which we have now seen a response from, right? So here's the weekly fair value gap, right? And then now again, price is moving higher, right? So we'll see how this order block here holds, right? Price can open up and drop down into that, possibly go higher, reach for some of the quadrants up here. If it fails to do that, and then we see the bonds continuing to fall, if they retrace back into this down candle and then have a pretty strong response to drop, we have the fair value gap down here to aim for, right? That supports the indices potentially falling. So we'll see if, that is what, takes place. We have to wait. We have CPI next week, so wouldn't be a surprising thing if they did want to try to smash through this fair value gap on a weekly basis. I do want to see that, but if we continue to see the indices want to reach higher, then this bond market drop here, maybe once it hits this fair value gap, may be very short-lived. It may just tap into that and then rally up to get back in line with the indices if that's what seems to be taking place. All right, so going into the other asset here, right, the yields, which dictates generally where the DXY is going to go, or it supports wherever the DXY is going to want to go. As you can see, it's been running higher, and if we go to the DXY, go to the DXY, we can see the result, right? What has transpired from the strong yields has led to a strong dollar, right? Came off the lows. I believe there was also SMT, if I'm not mistaken, at the highs here, right? Not only was there an SMT here, but there was also an SMT here by these highs as well. And then prices dropped in conjunction with the rallying DXY, which is also supported by the rallying yields. Okay, so we're going to see if that's going to continue. If that continues and this continues to drop, then eventually, sometime maybe next week, within the next 2 weeks, if all that stays intact, we most likely will see this potentially start giving us signs that this is going to potentially fall, especially because we have that SMT. Going into October, we can see how, here, let me pull up the interest rate market so I could show you guys something. This kind of gives us some context of what we can potentially expect. Sorry about that. So yeah, let's look at this real fast. I hope you guys could see this okay. But yeah, so going into October, if we drag this on over, right, end of September has generally a bearish tendency, and then it hits October, and we could see that all three of the averages here, the 27, 15, and 5-year, seem to be having interest to go higher, right? We could see that taking place here. Whether that's going to be extended for an extended period of time, we'll have to see because of what the bonds are doing. So if the bonds hit that weekly fair value gap I mentioned, right, if they hit this and then give a strong response higher and possibly bust through this down candle, which could potentially act as a breaker, or maybe this one actually, right, because that's the lowest down candle, right? If we can break through that, then that'll support continuous bullish seasonal tendency, and then obviously bullish indices will most likely continue. But if this continues to the downside and then this continues, right, bounces from this area, right, maybe it looks to reach up into this area here, then obviously we'll have bullish DXY eventually in the near future, and then we would see a potential top forming for the fourth quarter delivery, or the beginning of the fourth quarter delivery in the indices. All right, so we're gonna have to see. Again, there's a large SMT. If we go to like the 2-week chart, we could see SMT here, right? There's a higher high here, lower high here. So we'll see if that's gonna hold precedence over anything. Right, so we are starting the fourth quarter, so obviously we want to monitor what this is going to do, right? If this rallies up and then drops aggressively, gets down below this low, then we'll probably have an extended change in the state of delivery overall for the narrative on the higher time frame for the indices. And then again, if that's supported by this dropping, maybe responding to this down candle here, and then possibly having no response to this fair value gap, then again, we have trendline liquidity here. We have a low, 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 wick, wick, wick. Break all those down into quadrants. You have multiple targets if price does look to seek that downside objective. We have obviously, like I mentioned, this down candle. If it breaks through that and gets above it, then obviously that's something that may show interest to then get up above here. If we break through that, then we bust through these volume imbalances. Then possibly get above this fair value gap here that could act as an inversion, then obviously that would be signaling that we're probably looking to take out the highs here, and then that would lead to bullish indices. So again, I'd like to see if there's anything confirming the fact that the indices are looking to maybe top, but unless that takes place, we're going to continue to trust the fact that this is still looking to be bullish. Again, the last line in the sand would be down below this low, which is also breaking through the weekly fair value gap that seems to be holding as a bullish run higher, which we're going to trust until proven otherwise. Narrative doesn't change rapidly every single day, right? Bias can change inside of a narrative, right? That's how I like to look at it, and it allows you, I like to look at it that way because it allows you to stay with a narrative, stay with a particular direction until something significant changes, right? Because the last thing you want to do is be a flip-flopping psychopath trying to, change your decisions every 5 minutes. And, it's just overly stressful for literally no reason at all. So, yeah, I hope all that makes sense. So, yeah, if we come over here to the currencies, we could see that there's been a large run off the highs after we have fulfilled the weekly fair value gap that I pointed out for the last couple of weeks. Again, there's SMT at the high. I mean, if you look at these highs too, there's even SMT there. If I take some of this stuff off, similarly to the indices with their low here, that's the last line in the sand. In my opinion, this low here is also the last line in the sand as well. before price, maybe wants to look for more extended lower range targets. It wouldn't be unreasonable for them to, try to retrace back and then eventually drop further. We do have to also keep in mind this SMT at the lows here, similar to the SMT that's at these lows here as well. We want to be very cautious of that because that may again lead us to price continuing to go higher. We have this order block as well. But again, if price breaks through this low, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4 PD arrays broken to the downside, which would lead me to believe that again, price may want to continue to seek further sell side delivery. So yeah, unless that changes, we definitely want to monitor this to see if it's going to get back in line with bullishness. This is not very convincing that it is going to go higher. It shows obviously weakness in conjunction with the bullish yields and the bullish DXY for the time being. But yeah, we're just going to have to continue to monitor what takes place. We do have this monthly fair value gap, right? So if price does respond off the high or off this fair value gap, looks to, maybe start to have interest to aim lower again, then obviously we'll get back in line with that, and then that supports bullish indices, bullish currencies, especially if we have bearish bonds and then bullish yields. All right, so I'm gonna continue to have the opinion that this is going to continue to go higher. I'm going to have the opinion that maybe DXY is going to want to try to seek sell side liquidity at some point, unless something changes, obviously, right? So, with that being said, I hope all that makes sense to you guys. If it doesn't, obviously, let me know in the comments. This has basically shifted market structure. Whether that's going to be super extended remains to be seen. If this does continue, like I mentioned though, right, we have this fair value gap here too. If price stays above that and the yields continue to go higher and the bonds continue to go lower, then again, that may lead us to see some type of change in the indices or start to see some signals that it's going to change. And then again, if we get back down below this 8-hour fair value gap, if we stay below this volume imbalance, if we stay showing interest to get down below this low, and if we do eventually get down below that, then I'm 100% confident that we will then see price look to seek further sell side targets. All right, but again, there's nothing here giving us that information aside from the other elements that I've mentioned, which is the bonds being potentially bearish, the yields potentially showing like they have interest to be bullish, and then obviously the DXY giving this massive run higher. That's also potentially giving us a signal that price is potentially going to want to seek higher prices for a further extended time, especially because we're in a new quarter now. But then again, like I mentioned, it could very easily drop down, and this could be the manipulation for the new quarter that we're in. So we're going to want to monitor that. But yeah, I'm assuming that at some point in the near future, and like the next week or so, we'll start to see some type of reasoning for price to want to maybe seek the low here. Again, if this stays intact the way it is, if this maybe retraces and responds lower as a result, then again, that'll just be a signal that this is lagging to respond down to the downside, and it's just being manipulated, right? But again, we don't change our narrative just because something did a retracement, right? We got to hold on to the narrative until something logical is taken out. Like this, for example, breaking the 3 PD arrays to the downside using the 3 PDA rule for validation, invalidation, right? That doesn't only work on a lower time frame, it works definitely on the higher time frame. So that's what we're going to utilize, to give us insights whether things are going to change or continue to, in this case, remain bullish, at least for the time being. All right. So yeah, I hope all that stuff made sense. I just wanted to hop on here and do a weekly review. Obviously, if you get value from the video and the content that I provide, definitely like, comment, subscribe, and share this video with people you think it would benefit. I greatly appreciate your support. I hope you guys had a safe week last week and continue to have a safe week in the coming weeks and for the rest of the year. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments. And with that being said, you guys, I will talk to y'all on Tuesday when we'll do another live session here on YouTube. All right? So God bless and take care. I'll talk to you guys next time.